This is ScientificSnitch, and she's a literal Yahtzee. Got quite a big channel on here, 100 and something thousand followers. And I went on her live yesterday and had a lengthy discussion about the COVID jabs, mRNA ones in particular. And she was vehemently supporting this technology. Now, of course, lots of problems have been documented with it. One of the literal inventors of the platform, Dr. Robert Malone, has been out there for the last several years trying to explain some of the problems with how this technology was applied in these particular products. Right, so you can defend the platform as a concept. It does not mean, therefore, that every single thing developed under that banner of mRNA technology will be legitimately safe and effective. Okay, it depends on the manufacturing process, or on various other aspects of its production. So each product must, of course, be taken on its own merit and cannot be given legitimacy just by being one of the examples of that platform. Okay, it's false equivalence. That would be like saying there's no problem with thalidomide because sedatives were already a thing. You can't make those general claims. But she was so passionate and very good speaker, and she's got a lot of sources. She likes to cite sources like studies and such. But we know that there was unprecedented manipulation of data around COVID, unprecedented pressure academically and financially for people to present results that fall in line with the overall agenda of pushing these new treatments. Now, the wider context, of course, here is whether or not you believe that these things were safe and effective, right? And it can be demonstrably proven they were not. But even if you do 100% believe that they were safe and effective, and all of these trials and data that you're referencing are robust, legitimate, okay, that does not therefore follow that mandates can be justified in any way, shape, or form. The only context we have in recent history for mandated medical procedures, right, given to people without their consent, against their will, was when the Yahtsees did it, right? And it was such a serious violation of human rights that we took them to the Nuremberg trials and we dealt with them, right? So that's your brethren, right? That is who you share an opinion with on the concept of mandating medical procedures. But the live discussion that I had with ScientificSnitch was an exercise in psychology. It was fascinating because, yes, she's very intelligent. She has a very good ability to speak and present very rapidly lots of claims and refutations of points made. But none of it actually stands up to scrutiny. Because in order to make this claim that the mRNA jabs were safe and effective, you have to forget some undeniable facts about that situation. One, of course, being that the narrative changed as time went on. When they first brought these things to market, we were told that we'd only have to have the two and that'll be it, right? In fact, even when that was suggested, many people were saying, two? Why two? Normally you just have one for flu and various. Most other vaccines are given in one dose. Yellow fever, flu, take your pick. But they were told, okay, fine, let's have the two, and then that's it. We can come out of lockdown and you'll all have immunity and that'll be fine. Several months later, oh, actually, no, you're going to need a booster. In fact, you're going to need a booster in record short lengths of time, right? More frequently than any other vaccine given in history, right? People were having them every 6 months, okay? Of course, when the hype died down, most people stopped taking them. So even people that were pro-jabs in the first place and quite happy to trust the science presented by vested interests such as Big Pharma, who tried to hide the data from their trials for 50 years until a court in Texas forced them to release information. Trust in that process, you're fine, you went with it, you had your two initial jabs. Most people did not go back for boosters, especially after the third. It dropped off real quick because the hype had died down. People realised, oh, I'm still alive, probably don't need any more of those then. The uptake of these products would have been nowhere near as high if there hadn't been such unprecedented social pressures put upon us. Every angle we were bombarded with messages about needing to take these jabs. We'd never seen anything like this before. I mean, they had all of the talking heads on TV, on the media, and everywhere else telling us we needed to have these. We were coerced. We were emotionally coerced. We were told that you need to have these to protect your loved ones. If you care about your grandmother, you will have this. There were mandates implemented. Some of them were only implemented up until the last moment and then rode back on because, of course, the concept of mandating medications in this way flew against all other precedent of human rights. But it was long enough for people to feel the effects of that mandate policy, whether it was officially signed into law in the end or not. In the UK, for example, it was passed as policy. The care sector was told that you need to have these to keep your job. And the vast majority of people that I know working in the care sector only had these jabs because of the threat of losing their jobs, not because that they were deathly scared of for their health or they felt like they needed them. They were getting them because they were told they had to or they would be out the door. So without all of that unprecedented social pressure, we would not have seen such a high uptake for these jabs, and then there'd be no argument at all that they saved so many lives, that they were so important. Okay, even as it is, even with the rate of people that took these jabs, there is also remains several billion people on this planet that did not have them and remain perfectly healthy, and I'm one of them. Of course, several other serious problems were identified with these jabs. For example, they told us it would stay in the deltoid. It didn't. It later was found to be travelling around the body, congregating in organs, causing potential problems, of course. Tests were done on mice to show that if you gave these drugs intravenously and it went straight to the heart, it would cause myocarditis. We did see a spike in myocarditis after the jabs came out. She tried to make the old argument that, oh, actually, myocarditis is much more serious from COVID itself. But we didn't see a spike of myocarditis in 2020. That didn't come until after the jab rollout in 2021. And linked to this, they weren't aspirating the needle to make sure that it didn't go into a vein. This is basic procedure omitted from the application of the COVID jabs. Now, some countries actually realised later on down the line that this was a problem and implemented aspiration to their procedure unilaterally. Japan and Denmark did this. There's also, of course, the fact that it only created an ostensible, very narrow immunity. It was only based on the spike protein, which is only a small part of an entire pathogen genome. Of course, natural exposure to the virus creates a much broader immunity to the entire genome of that pathogen. But ScientificSnitch seems to be obsessed with appeal to authority. And of course, you can make claims about safety and efficacy on both sides because there are trials and studies that make opposing claims, and you have to look deeper into things like invested interests. But one thing that is almost universally accepted about these jabs is they did not prevent transmission. You could still receive and pass on the SARS-CoV-2 virus. You could still test positive after having had the jab. So it did not stop you passing it on or developing symptoms, becoming infectious. Okay, so that means the whole concept of a mandate cannot be logically justified. Even if they did 100% stop transmission, you still couldn't justify the concept of a mandate logically or ethically. For one, of course, because natural immunity through exposure does also give you immunity, and in fact a broader immunity. So there's no argument to say the jab is the only way to stop you being infectious, even though it doesn't do that anyway. But let's steelman the argument and say that it did do that. It didn't. Natural immunity does the same thing. So you can't say you have to have the jab to make yourself less dangerous to other people that you're around. And of course, the other thing is informed consent and body sovereignty is the baseline of all human rights. It is the most basic and central human right, that I have the right to decide what goes into my body, and I cannot be penalised for disagreeing with somebody else's opinion of what I need to put into my body. Again, this was tested and proven at the Nuremberg trials, where it was held up to be one of the most serious violations of human rights, and we dealt with them for mandating medical procedures. That is the real conversation here, not whether or not you believe studies that claim for them to be safe and effective. The real bigger issue here is that the framework is being created right now around our ears to make mandating medical interventions more easy and commonplace in the future. We have the WHO that has recently increased its own powers to dictate policy for sovereign nations. So the WHO now wants unilateral power to declare what constitutes a public health crisis and the response to it. So congratulations, ScientificSnitch. You're a very good speaker. You're very good at rapid fire conversation, but it doesn't change the fact that you are a literal Yahtzee if you truly support the concept of mandates.